Just a warning, this episode may contain language or topics that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hey everybody, I'm Zoe.
And I'm Chandi.
And this is Bound by the Cloak.
Karen Boes was convicted of arson and first-degree murder of her 14-year-old daughter, Robin, in 2003. What started as an ordinary day in July of 2002 turned out to be a nightmare for Karen Boes and her family. Immediately after Robin's death, Karen was seen as the prime suspect and was interrogated by detectives, ATF agents, and her neighbor, who was the police chief. The interrogation went on for over 12 consecutive hours, eventually leading into an internalized false confession. Karen eventually believed, based on what the detectives and the agents had told her about the scene of the crime, that she was the one who committed the arson in a dream or unconscious state.
After exhausting all appeals, the Innocence Clinic of the University of Michigan Law School took up Karen's case in 2021. It took a lot of effort, but we were able to get in touch with Karen Boes. Karen is currently incarcerated in a women's prison in Southeast Michigan. We had a really deep conversation with Karen about that day, July 30th, 2002. A bit about the case, the false confession, and her life in prison. We spoke to Karen over the phone, and the recording is pretty good, but you might need to listen closely. So, without further ado, let's just jump right into it.
Thanks so much, Karen and Dave, for speaking with us today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Karen, I'm from Michigan, so how are things? How's the weather there today?
It's really pleasant. It's a beautiful summer day. It's been perfect from morning till now.
So hi, Karen. My name is Zoe. I'm the other host of the podcast. I wanted to start off with what happened the day of the fire.
Well, let's see. I got up and just went downstairs. Bedrooms were upstairs, and just started doing daily things that I do in the morning, getting things around and whatnot. And I was going to go shopping with my girlfriend that morning. So we were going to get ready for that, but I had some stuff I wanted to do, and we were going to go on vacation, so I wanted to get ready for that. Just some stuff in the house. And so I was downstairs working and getting ready, and I didn't see Robin at all that morning. I heard her up. I heard her walking around in her bedroom to the bathroom and whatnot, and flush the toilet, different stuff. She was just putzing around. So anyway, she didn't come back down. I assumed she probably went back to bed, but I didn't know what she was doing at all. So I just I left when I was supposed to leave to go with my girlfriend to go shopping, and picked her up. And then we started riding to Grand Rapids. We had a few stops in between, but started riding to Grand Rapids, and then we got to Payless Shoes on 28th Street, and my cell phone rang. It was my son, and he told me that our home was on fire. And I said, well, last I knew, Robin was in there. Is she in there yet? They couldn't locate her. So they kept trying to find her and couldn't. Then he said he'd call me back. And we turned around right away. Immediately we turned around and not just came home, but raced home. I was really a mess, and my driving wasn't good, and I was going too fast, of course. But so my girlfriend made me stop the truck, and she got in and drove, and then we proceeded to come to Zealand, back where I live, and the streets were blocked off about 2 blocks before we got to my home, and jumped out of the truck, but we couldn't go any farther. And then I told them that, I was the person that lived in that house, and so they let me through. So I got to the house, and they had determined that Robin was in there. And I just went crazy. And I did everything I could to rush in there to get her. And it was futile. There were too many people around. They were holding me down. And I wasn't able to get into her. The house was on fire, and my husband was over by the house with the firefighters. Anyway, I got pretty wild or pretty bad, and they ended up giving me a shot of Valium because they couldn't control me, because I was determined to go in the house. And anyway, then I remember seeing my husband's face. I see in my husband's face, and I knew that something had happened, or that it wasn't good. And then I saw them bring Robin out on a stretcher. I just fell apart. I have no other. I remember screaming or wailing, let's put it that way, and that was the sound that I had never heard before. It was so mournful. It was awful. But anyway, since I've been here in prison, I've heard that sound a couple times. One time in particular, a good friend had answered the phone, and her son had died. And it's an animal sound. And it just brought all that right back to me. That day was not good. So I think we went over to my in-laws' house. I'm not sure how I got there. And then the police came, and they started questioning me. And of course, I didn't suspect anything at all. I mean, I figured they're just, doing their job, whatever. And they asked me to come into the police station later on and write a statement, and I did. And then I came back to my in-laws' house, probably, I don't know how long it took to write the statement, and things just escalated from there as far as them pulling me in to question me. And I was questioned, I think 4 or 5, I'm not real sure, I think 4 different times. But a whole total of like 21 and a half hours. It was just very, very lengthy. The one time was super lengthy and grueling. It was a very grueling interrogation. I didn't get an attorney, which was was just plain stupid on my part. But in my naivety, I really believed that, I knew I didn't do anything wrong. And I wanted to find out what happened to my daughter, Robin. And the police said that was their main concern, too, to find out what happened to my daughter. And I trusted them. And I knew the chief of police that was of our little town. I knew him really good from church and from babysitting his kids, and our kids hung around together and stuff. And so I just trusted anybody that ever gets in a situation like this. My first advice would be, especially if you're innocent, get an attorney, get counsel before you even speak a word. When I got arrested, probably about I'm not real sure how long afterwards, maybe a month and a half. I'm not real sure of the time there.
To go back to what you had said about the advice that you would give is ask for a lawyer. Curious as to what prompted you to go to the police station to speak with law enforcement that day.
They kept questioning me and kept pulling me in to be questioned. And I just did not think there was, I just figured they were trying to help me figure out what happened with my daughter, what happened to my daughter that morning. Just totally naive. It was just not a good thing. Didn't even think about getting an attorney, for a few of the interviews or interrogation that I had, because I had nothing to hide, and I knew that I just had nothing there that could incriminate me. It just was not part of my thought process at all. I was just determined to find out what happened that morning.
We've talked to other people, in similar situations where they did the same thing. They thought that, speaking to law enforcement, because, they figured I'm telling the truth, I have nothing to hide, right? And then they go and tell the truth, and then they realize that it doesn't always work out the way that they think it will. And it's a shame. But how did the Innocence Clinic take up your case?
Well, actually, it's been quite a long process, but when I first got incarcerated, then a woman and a student came to visit me in prison, and they told me, they said, "We believe you're innocent, and we'd like to help you." I had to go through the process of the court appeals, and I had attorneys. My parents hired decent attorneys, and U of M offered to help back then. And my attorneys didn't take them up on it. I think they probably thought they had a good case and it was going to be done. I don't know why. Then about 2017, I should say 2015, so a lady got a hold of me from Los Angeles, and she was going to put together a show for Netflix. She asked if I would interview for her show. I of course said yes once I found out a little bit more about it. And so then we did that, did the show, and that aired in 2017. And shortly after that, U of M picked up my case. And I couldn't be more grateful. Oh my gosh, I just couldn't have anybody better helping me out. I'm just so blessed. Oh my God.
Well, thanks, Karen. We're very, very proud to represent you.
I'm really glad that University of Michigan has picked it up. So what could you tell us a little bit about the current status or the progress that they have made in your case?
Well, they have done over 5 years of them. I think it's about that, Dave.
Karen said we did pick up the case after Kelly Loudenberg put together a series, the Confessions tapes. It's one of the episodes featuring Karen's case. But we did spend quite a bit of time investigating both the fire, the way in which the interrogation of Karen was conducted, and also subsequently what happened to one of the fire investigators, the main fire investigator who testified against Karen was subsequently discredited. But where we are is that we filed a motion for relief from judgment a year ago, and we've been waiting for the prosecution to finish filing their answer, and that's going to happen. Their due date is July 18th, so next Monday. And then after that, then we'll be moving for an evidentiary hearing and hopefully holding a hearing where we'll be calling our expert witnesses, and the prosecution may be calling expert witnesses of their own.
Yeah, and they have, U of M Innocence Clinic has just gotten hold of some of the best people that renowned in the United States that get on my case and help out, and just went above and beyond. Just very diligent. The students and the attorneys there, or Dave and whoever else is working there, just super diligent, always working on my case and up on it and keeping me up and telling me like in plain terms what's going on and whatnot, and what they have found, whatnot. So just have full confidence in them.
That's great. It really is wonderful that there are these resources now for people that are wrongfully convicted. It's amazing. And so, talking about, the updates, like the new information that's known about fire science and investigations and police interrogations, I guess first, when you were being interviewed by the police, you said you didn't have really at first you didn't know it was going to turn into an interrogation. But at what moment did you realize that it was going from interview to interrogation, that you were sort of being accused?
I don't remember what interview or interrogation it was, but it was the lengthy one. There was one that was super, super long, and that was in Grand Haven. And did a polygraph and told me that I failed miserably. And I just was floored. I couldn't believe it. And I says, I don't believe that's true. It can't be true, because that's just not what's in me. I don't know how that would come out like that. And so anyway, they kept interrogating me and or interviewing me. Told me many things that were falsehood. Really messed with my head a lot, big time. Made me start believing that maybe something did happen, and I don't know. They kept pounding that into me, and kept giving me scenario after scenario of what could have happened, and let's see, close your eyes and let's picture what happened in here, and you're moving along, and then you did this next. And did you see this? And it was there. And I went along with their little games, and because I really wanted to figure out what was going on. But shortly after it got going, like after the polygraph, I did ask our chief of police, Bill Olney, if I needed to get an attorney. And he says, no, I don't think so at this point.
Yeah, that's just one of those things. Like, you don't know until, later, but yeah, getting an attorney is always, now, everybody knows it's like, in terms of, what we know about interrogations and police interviews, getting an attorney is integral. And then when it comes to the fire investigation, the claims that were made by prosecution, and even when it comes to the claims made by the police, how did all that make you feel?
I was just flabbergasted, and the story they put together, it just was not something that took place in my life. And so I was just sitting there thinking that's just one lie after another. And I knew this. I was really, really just taken aback that they were accusing me of something so horrendous. I adore my kids. I adored Robin. And there'd be no way I'd never even hit her. I would not hurt my daughter, ever. Nothing like that.
One thing about your story that I think we want to bring up is the town of Zeeland. What is Zeeland like? What's the culture of the town?
I live in a very conservative community and pretty tight-knit and very religious, very self-righteous. Anyway, I did not fit in that mold. So I went to church just like everybody else did and whatnot, but I was an alcoholic. And anyway, throughout that time, throughout my married years, I did have an affair. And of course, all this stuff came out during the trial or before trial. And I just looked like the harlot that I was, And a lot of people in my town have a lot of issues, but everything is kept in the closet. For this stuff to be brought out it was just so taboo. Maybe that I felt like I was a part of. It's like they turned on me. And I felt like how could they not know me and know that I, wouldn't ever do anything like this. But the marks against me were just too much. I think I was just really judged a lot by that, even though the affair had nothing to do with Robin's death or anything. But everything came out in the public, and I was just condemned. I had a lot of people standing behind me, a lot of people that know me, that do know me, and are still behind me. I really feel like I have a lot of support in the community, but of course there's always going to be people that are going to keep judging me, and that's okay. They have a right to do that, and I understand that. But they haven't walked in my shoes either.
From what you've mentioned, Karen, about Zeeland and the culture of the town, would it be safe to say that law enforcement is seen as like the supreme authority, that people are going to believe what law enforcement tells them to believe?
Oh my gosh, yes. I truly, truly believe that. Super small community. And like I said, just very conservative. I believe that probably a lot of them had a lot of the same thoughts I did. I was brought up, my core belief was that the police are good. They're there to help me out. Anything they say is the gospel truth, and you wouldn't question that. I didn't question that. And that's how I believe probably a lot of people are, still in our community. I know, like, talking to my girlfriends and stuff, their eyes are wide open now compared to what they were. But, I used to have the belief, too, that everybody that the police arrested, they must have had enough evidence against them to arrest them. And so they had something going. And They wouldn't bring them to trial if they didn't have anything solid going. But that isn't the case. And the falsehoods are just, I don't know. They're hidden, of course, or not hidden, but who's going to question them? I never thought about questioning stuff like I do now today and going through the system like I did. I was of the full belief that, they're here to serve and protect me. And gonna do the right thing always. I no longer hold to that core belief. I had kind of changed a lot, but I still have faith. I still have faith that there are good people out there and good police officers out there, and that justice, I do believe justice is going to come through. I'm very, very fortunate, like I said, to have people fighting for me like they are, and not everybody gets this opportunity, and I'm very well aware of that, and just how blessed I am. But I think the public is not aware of the deception that is allowed in the courts and the deception that the police can convey to anybody they want to meet their needs to get to their own end.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like you were made to be a target at all, or do you think that? I mean, it's pretty clear that the affair and being in recovery, being an alcoholic, maybe that persuaded the jury and persuaded just people in general. But do you think that do you think you were made to be a target in any way?
I do, very much so. I would believe that I was an easy target. They wanted to find somebody to blame for this, whatever it was. And I think I just probably stood out like a sore thumb. Here I am, Yeah, I believe that I probably was a target. I don't believe that they questioned my husband near enough. I don't believe my husband had anything to do with this either. But they didn't bother to question him, but he's part of the good old boy system in our little town. Well, they didn't even bother. And
what went wrong here, first thing that went wrong was the fire investigation. And fire investigation in the United States was revolutionized starting in the early 1990s. But unfortunately, Michigan was pretty late in adopting the new scientific approach to fire investigation. And so what we've seen is that the fire investigators who investigated this fire were still using methods that had been discredited more than a decade earlier and weren't being used in most other parts of the country. And because they were using these methods, particularly this one flawed approach called deepest char, they wrongly concluded that this fire started in the hallway outside Robin's room instead of inside her room, even though they found no accelerant at all in the hallway. They found accelerant inside Robin's room, but they didn't find any in the hallway. But because they were blinded by their continued reliance on what should have been by then discredited fire investigation techniques, they had to find somebody who was responsible, because what they were looking at told them that this fire was intentionally set because it was, they believed it started in the hallway. And so that's why they targeted Karen, because she was the last person who was known to be in the house with Robin.
So with all of these new fire science techniques that have come to light, right? And knowing that older police interrogation tactics and older fire investigation techniques are flawed. So why do you think it's so difficult to get a court to reopen or overturn the conviction with this evidence?
Well, I hope it won't be. we're encouraged that the new judge who's come onto this case seems very interested in the new evidence that we've put forward so far. So I'm certainly not going to prejudge what this judge is going to do, and I hope this judge will continue to show the interest in the evidence that we found and will ultimately do the right thing.
Why do you think in the past it's been so hard to get any motions filed, or any appeals made?
Well, it's just very hard to overturn convictions. I can tell you, as somebody who's been in the business now for 14 years of trying to overturn convictions, we've succeeded in several dozen cases, but every one of them is a struggle because the system was designed with this idea of near infallibility in mind. That the dominant paradigm for decades was that criminal justice system was so good that the chances of anyone being wrongfully convicted were like being hit by a meteorite. And DNA started to show us that wasn't true. And since the era of DNA exoneration started about 30 years ago, we've had more and more convictions overturned, not only with DNA, but with other new methods and other kinds of new evidence ever since. So what we're seeing now is that the system is somewhat more willing to admit that mistakes are made than it used to be, but it's still a knockdown, drag-out struggle in most cases.
Karen.
Yes.
You've been incarcerated for some time, and can you tell us how have you advocated for yourself and for your innocence? What specific actions have you taken to, towards your advocacy to still tell people about your innocence?
I haven't went out to the public too much with it. Just my family and my friends and stuff, and basically have told people of my innocence, and I haven't been out there to advocate for myself. I really didn't know of any opportunities to do so, and until more recently. And now I realize that there's a lot more people out there that are interested in finding out the truth and making some correction. But back in the day, I didn't. I've been here 20 years, and for many years, I didn't have any idea that there was anybody out here be interested. I knew U of M was, and their hands were tied until I got through with my appeals and whatnot. And
the thing that we want to do, get your story out there as much as possible, as far reaching as possible, so people are aware. People are aware of your son, even for themselves. Understanding what can happen.
absolutely.
It can happen to anybody. It really can.
Yeah. And I just truly believe that now. Like I said, I was naive. I didn't watch much TV. I still don't. But to be aware that, so trusting, and just really believing, I had these core beliefs about the police.
It really kind of shook you to your core, right? The fact that you had these thoughts about the police and law enforcement, and it completely went against what you've been taught your whole life. And I think that is the case for a lot of people. We've spoken to a few people, and each time there's like some similarities, and the similarities are ask for a lawyer.
Absolutely, that would just be the first thing, and especially if you are innocent. That would just be the first thing. It happens to people that, I'm an average person. I'm an average person. I was very law-abiding. Not that I never broke any laws, but for the most part, just very, very law-abiding. I still am. I follow all the rules. Just a rule follower and do everything I'm supposed to do, and I'm not below intelligence. It hits anybody. That's what I'm trying to say. Especially probably if you're most unsuspecting, but it's not like I'm dumb or anything, or have any learning disabilities. It hits ordinary people that are just living their lives. I was just going to go shopping for a pair of pants that morning with my girlfriend, and I ended up here,
Karen's absolutely right that the kind of wrongful conviction she suffered is especially likely to happen to someone like her, who's not a criminal, has no experience with the criminal justice system, and generally trusts the criminal justice system and the police. So she didn't confess, but by lying to her over and over again about the evidence, about the polygraph, about everything else, she was convinced that she must have done it and just couldn't remember it. And ultimately, that's where they got her to after hours and hours of interrogation. And then after she had time to reflect, she knew that wasn't true and came back and told them it wasn't true. But we've had a number of other cases in the Michigan Innocence Clinic, and we've seen scores of these cases nationwide where especially traumatized people who are mourning, people who are frightened, are persuaded by lies, and their memory must be wrong. And that's one of the most frightening forms of false confession. But once you get that, then it's very hard for the jury to understand why somebody would do that, because, of course, they weren't there. They weren't traumatized. They weren't put through the hours and hours of lies and being told that their memory must be wrong.
Yeah, by the time I was, I don't know how far into the interrogation, but I really started thinking that there was something mentally wrong with me, and I could not remember what was, because all these lies that they were telling me, I started thinking they must be the truth. And so then I had to put together some scenarios and of course they helped me work out the scenarios. Sad situation. I didn't confess, and anytime I said anything close to anything like go through the stories, and then I say, no, that didn't happen. That was just made them extremely frustrated. But by the time we were done with the last interview, which was 11 and a half hours, I ended up going to psychiatric ward in a hospital in Holland and stayed there for a couple days. So I knew that if I went home after that, I would try to kill myself. I knew that was going to probably be my only possibility. I couldn't handle.
So you voluntarily went to a psych ward?
I did, yeah. I did.
Right after the marathon interrogation, where they tried to convince her that she must have done it in a blackout.
Right. This is like 10 o'clock at night. I mean, this went on it started at 8:30 in the morning, and by 10 o'clock at night, that's when finally, it was after dark, summertime.
And you were grieving, so they played on your grief.
Yes, absolutely. 7 days before that, we buried Robin. And I couldn't keep my life together at that point, And then all this slamming me, it was overwhelming.
I mean, this is just a whole different kind of injustice. Preying on somebody who's grieving, gaslighting them, and obviously gaslighting works when the gaslighter is held in high regard or is well respected, like law enforcement in that small town.
Right. And so some of the lies, like telling Karen that her fingerprints were found on the gas can, those are just devastating, because it would make somebody, it would make anybody, but especially somebody in a mental state like Karen was in at that point, distrust their own memory.
And that's the thing. Police are allowed to say these things during interviews and interrogations. It's perfectly legal for them to do. Yeah.
Right. And I don't believe that the public is aware of any of that. They would even use some of those tactics and be able to use those falsehoods or lies and bring them out like that. So I certainly was not. I thought it was the gospel truth, and I thought that can't be, but they kept convincing me, trying to convince me that it was. And it wasn't just like one man, it was, I was in a small room, and at times there were 3 or 4 men in there standing up around me, trying to convince me to confess.
That's really intimidating.
It was very intimidating. Yes, it was. And they'd send the polygraph guy back in, and then they send the chief of police. I kept asking for my husband. My husband didn't come in. I think he finally came in later at night.
That's an especially effective technique that police use, is the polygraph. So, most members of the public don't know that, first of all, that polygraphs are junk science, not admissible in court for that reason. But also that to the extent that there is anything there with a polygraph, that you can't get an instant polygraph read. Reading a polygraph chart is a long, complex process. And so this was a technique that we often see, is that, okay, well, we'll give you a polygraph, and then very shortly afterwards they declare, well, you failed miserably, so we know you're lying. And so we know that's a lie.
David, is it true? I'm trying to remember back. This has been early on in your investigation of it, but we tried to get a hold of the polygraph, but they no longer had it.
We've never found it.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Which leads us to believe that this is a standard police interrogation technique. Sometimes they'll tell people they're taking a polygraph, but they're not even actually making charts. The whole thing is just a setup in order to tell the person later that they failed. So they don't even make charts. They make charts, but don't even read them.
So how is this even something that they're able to do and get away with?
Because the courts let them get away with it. Because in case after case after case, courts have held that the police are free to tell the most flagrant, outrageous lies during interrogation.
I mean, this is something that just kind of needs to be shouted from the rooftops, because this is not what we see in the media.
Well, certainly in the legal literature, we know all about it. And for years, researchers have shown that these kind of lies about scientific evidence, such as her fingerprints being on the can, lies about polygraphs, are especially likely to convince people that their memories must be wrong and they must be guilty after all. And so it is a huge risk factor for false incriminating statements and wrongful conviction. And fortunately, our courts just aren't willing to stand up to the police and say, you can't do this anymore. None of our arguments are about that, about saying that the police did anything illegal, their interrogation of Karen. Our arguments about the interrogation is that all of this new research is something that should be brought to the jury. So a jury in 2022 or 2023 would know that they should be far more skeptical of the results of this interrogation, because the research since Karen's trial has shown that these kind of techniques are especially likely to produce false incriminating statements and so-called compliant false confessions.
Thank you, David. I appreciate your input here.
I have a question, Karen. It's been 20 years. Like, how are you? Really?
How am I?
Yeah.
I'm really good. I have managed to live a very good life here, and I have just had some excellent opportunities to have good jobs here. Therapeutic units or therapeutic programs. I was chosen to be a mentor. I was a mentor for 2 therapeutic units for a total of 10 years about. And just have had some really good jobs. I've been able to work in my community and go to church in my community and just be a part of the community that I'm in right now and make it work. And I just believe by the grace of God, He has just given me peace and presented these opportunities for me to be able to do them. be here to feel like maybe my life is fulfilled or worth living. I've been able to help a lot of people, and they've helped me. They've helped me right back. I've been able to. One thing, I do a lot of artwork, and I love artwork, and so I've had a lot of opportunities in here to do a lot of that for the staff and for the programs that I worked in. And I held 2 art classes for 4 years. I've had a really good experience, but you have to make it that way. Things I could get involved in, but I don't.
Can you tell us more about your artwork? What medium, what do you usually draw? Just curious about that part.
Well, I started art when I was quite a bit younger, and way before I was married. But it was something that was a hobby for me, basically. I didn't go to school for it, but just a few classes here and there. Anyway, I've done artwork all through the years, oil painting, acrylic and stuff. And then when I had kids, they ended up being too messy. Started with colored pencil, and I just love working with colored pencil. And then my kids were able to do it with me too through the years. And I worked with a lot of colored pencil mostly, some ink and whatnot. But yeah, the opportunity I had to have art classes with the young ladies at the therapeutic unit was just amazing for me. So been an interesting trip here. And I can't say it's been all great years like that, but for the most part, overall it is. My first 3 years that I was here, I was in mourning. I don't remember my first 3 years here. And I have little glimpses of a couple things, but basically my mind is turned off to that morning time that I had when I first got here. Then I snapped out of it, started living again.
Do you get to see friends and family and loved ones often, or how often do you get to see them?
Since the COVID thing, I haven't seen anybody, except for U of M comes quite often, and the producer of the Netflix documentary, she comes, but my friends it's been pretty well cut off. But now they're starting to do some video visiting stuff. But yeah, I talk to my girlfriends all the time, talk to my friends probably at least once a week, and write to a lot of people, that I just in communication with a lot of people that are in support of me. It's good to know that people do believe in me. That's been tremendous all in itself, to know that the people at U of M really believe Dave and the people working there. That has been just a lifesaver for me as far as keeping my head above water, as far as that I'm okay, and believing in myself. A lot of women here don't have that kind of support, and there are more women here that are like me that's not supposed to be here. And I just have been very fortunate to have a lot of people on my side out in the community.
I've had mentors most of my life, and I haven't done a good job of telling them how much they've meant to me. So your mentees could also be in the same boat. They just know how much your words and your advice have meant to them, but we forget to tell the people that we're grateful for.
Yeah, we do. We all do, don't we?
Yeah.
That's a good reminder. Good reminder to me. Maybe I'll write some notes tomorrow and get them out in the mail to the people that are in support of me. The 2 programs that I was involved in, I do want to mention that. The first one, I was hired as a mentor for 4 years, and that was called ARSON, and that was substance abuse programs. It's been a lot of good there for me, too. And just to have that constant awareness and having to teach it to other people, about substance abuse and living a life of sobriety, just been so helpful for me through the years. And the other program that I was a mentor of was DBT, is dialectical behavior therapy. You've probably heard of that before.
Yeah, that's pretty popular.
So I kind of taught that for over 4 years, about 5 years. So, and that's where I was able to do the artwork. And like you said, it's therapy all in itself. So it truly is. But both things have of great benefit to me as well. So, well, I really appreciate this so much.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Anything really that we want to help in any way we can. That's what we're about. So
we do. Thank you, Karen, and for all that you're doing, and for all your mentoring, and also for speaking to us.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure.
We would like to thank Karen Boes for taking the time to speak with us about her personal story. We would also like to thank the Innocence Clinic of the University of Michigan Law School for arranging our phone conversation with Karen and working out all the logistics. They're doing a great job in representing Karen. And I think we're going to keep tabs on this one to see where it goes. We will have resources about Karen's case in the show notes, and any updates on Karen's case, we will definitely be posting about them. So check out social media and our website for any of those updates.
And if you're not caught up with season 2, make sure to check us out. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.